Book 4, Falcon in the Barn, Chapter 35. I have an idea, a plan. Mahrree hadn't realized the water was flooding the field until it stopped flowing. Oh, she stared, bewildered at her feet. And here I thought you were doing better with the watering, she heard Perrin's voice. Distracted? Mahrree rolled her eyes at the obvious. It's been 3 weeks, Perrin. Shem should be returning. She stopped short. She still couldn't get used to it. Perrin in one of Cambazola Brighter's old floppy hats. Dec had pulled it out for his father-in-law, and Perrin appreciated the loose weave of the pale straw. But whenever Mahrree saw her husband, her first reaction was always terror that a towering scarecrow was creeping up on her. Actually, Shem's back tomorrow, Perrin said, and he put on what Mahrree was calling his farmhand face to begin his slow drawl. Mr. Brighter says we done well today. We can go home for dinner now, missus. The boys already headed back, missus. Just me and you for a stroll. He waggled his eyebrows. Mahrree cracked a smile. Sometimes I just don't understand you. I think a bit of Cambazola's spirit must be in that hat. How can you be so cheerful when the village still won't even acknowledge we're alive? He chuckled as he put his arm around her to steer her to the far west side of the farm. While avoiding the fort road meant their walk home took a bit longer, it was worth it to circumvent the traffic. I had a breakthrough today with someone who used to shun us. Really? For the first time in weeks, Mahrree felt a glimmer of hope. She was growing weary of neighbors and villagers turning their backs to her, fleeing the shops when she and Jatsi arrived as they opened, and catching the sidelong glares of soldiers. Who's tolerating us? Clover, Perrin announced. Clover? Wait, isn't that one of Dec's cows? It is, he said breezily. We tried one of his experiments. While he was doing that sweet talking to her, who's the good milker, who's the good milker, my Clover is, I snuck around behind her. Instead of Dec sitting down at the bucket, I did. I nearly had the bucket full before Clover turned and noticed it was me. She tried to stomp on my boot only twice, but I got her milked. He held up his hands. We're calling it an utter success. Mahrree groaned. Oh, come on. Even Pato thought that was funny. It's definitely the hat. There's no other excuse. I do like the hat, Perrin declared, but primarily for the reason coming up. Mahrree looked ahead and sighed. Soldiers. It had taken them 3 days to figure out that the Shins were no longer using the main road. Now there were pairs stationed along the perimeter of the farm and the back alleys Perrin and Mahrree took to get home. For the past week, however, there had been fewer guards, and today the 2 positioned beyond the gate had their heads bent down over something. Perrin adjusted his hat, pulling it down to his eyebrows. When he tipped his head down, the soldiers couldn't see his face, although they knew the brawny scarecrow was him, and Perrin could spy on them through the gaps of the straw. Today, the pair on duty merely glanced up at the Shins, then went back to studying what looked like a book. Mahrree had seen the dark red cover in the window of Serene's bookshop, and thought it odd that soldiers were reading instead of soldiering. They passed in silence, and only once they were 20 paces away did Perrin release a low whistle. Our dear Captain Thorne is in trouble, he said smugly. How do you know? Mahrree was tempted to turn back to see what her husband noticed, but knew better than to draw attention to herself. Grinning, Perrin pushed the straw hat above his brow. While I know the soldiers were never perfect under me, none would have ever dared to be so derelict in their duties. That tells me a few things. 1, the soldiers have no respect for Thorne. Those sergeants aren't even worried that someone may notice their lax behavior. 2, I didn't recognize those sergeants, which means they came recently from another fort. And when fort commanders transfer soldiers, they always unload their troublemakers. Those sergeants probably don't even know why they're on this route, or who we are. If Lemuel asked for help from the other forts, he didn't get it. That means we're no longer a high priority. And I suspect that Thorn's biggest concern right now is that he's losing men. Mahrree was mystified. How did you put that together? Early this morning, when I came to help Deck with the cows, I spied 4 soldiers with their full packs jogging from the fort. I knew those soldiers, and none of them had leave coming. They were deserting. He chuckled darkly. Mahrree couldn't help but snicker as well. And the ones on duty are reading books about love. Perrin cleared his throat. Not exactly reading, and not quite love. What do you mean? He sighed. In the brief, unfortunate moment that I happened to focus on the page they were poring over, I noticed that it was a woodcut of a woman without clothes. Mahrree stopped dead in her tracks. Keep moving, Perrin hissed as he pulled her along. We're now in view of the watchtower, and a soldier is actually watching. Act natural. She forced her feet to keep up with him. How can I act natural when you tell me that Serene is selling books with woodcuts of... She couldn't bring herself to say the words. I know, Perrin whispered, keeping his gaze through the straw focused on the tower. All right, he's no longer watching us. This is good, Mahrree. Better than good. It's turning out to be great. Great, Mahrree wailed in a whisper. Great that Serene has brought to Edge books of... She still couldn't say the words. Perrin smiled as they turned east onto the alley that would lead to their back garden. No, not about the book, but about the soldiers. Look, the other pair that's normally posted here isn't. Do you realize what this means? Serene's having a sale, and all of the soldiers are waiting in line? Well, maybe, but it's working. Young's advice? Stay low, go quiet until the soldiers get bored. No one's paying extra attention to us, Mahrree. That means we can start doing something else, he whispered conspiratorially. Such as? Remember how a couple of weeks ago I told you I was working on a new plan? Yes. Want to hear it? Mahrree grinned at his boyish enthusiasm. Yes. He gripped her arm. Wait till we get home. And stop smirking. I see the other soldier trying to hide in the shrubs. You're smirking too, Mahrree pointed out. Someone really should tell Thorn that no one believes a shrub has undertones of blue and boots that stick out. They couldn't help but snicker together as they passed the spying soldier. Mahrree hadn't felt so lighthearted in weeks, and guiltily realized it was partly because all that her husband had built for the past 19 years was falling apart because he had left it. They went to the back door and found Pato at the table, sleepily finishing off the chicken pot pie. Seeing her weary son sobered Mahrree again. The poor boy had nothing. No friends, no kickball, no future. Perrin's smirk had dissolved as well. Leave us anything to eat? He asked his son. Couple of crumbs, Pato yawned. I'm heading to bed. When I die, I'm going to ask the Creator why cows insist on being milked so early in the morning. Surely he could have planned that a little better. Someone all-knowing should have known I hate early mornings. Perrin chuckled until Pato shut his bedroom door, and Mahrree heard the contrived tone of it. She sighed. You know the message he got a few days ago and threw into the hearth? I fished it out. It was to inform him that the University of Idemia wouldn't have room for him, and that the professional kickball teams didn't want him to come for tryouts. I had been hoping our family troubles were confined only to Edge, and that maybe Pato could go south, and that you and I with him, until all of this died down. But now I realize," her voice began to break, "there's nowhere we can go. The whole world will shun us." Perrin pulled her into his arms. "I agree that we can't go on like this," he whispered. "We have to do something for Pato. He's almost 17 and has nothing to look forward to." "But Perrin, what can we do? Maybe when Shem comes back, he'll have some news." "Mahrree, he's already back. He rode by earlier this morning." "But you told me he wouldn't be back until tomorrow." "Sorry, but I didn't want to worry you until we got home. Shem sent me a quick look. Wasn't safe for him to stop and talk, and I could tell that he knows something, and it's not good." She sagged in his arms. She was going to suggest that perhaps Shem could take Pato to his father's ranch near Flax, and that maybe they could go as well. But if Shem heard even on the southern edges of the world about the Shins... "But Mahrree," Perrin cut into her thoughts, "I have a plan, remember? It will fix a great many things, and give Pato something to do." She pulled out of his embrace to see him. Well, the only way to describe his demeanor was nearly giddy. And it wasn't because of Cambazola's hat, which he had taken off. "Since the soldiers aren't watching us anymore, it's time to share with you what I've been working on for the past few weeks." He released her, rushed into the study, and came back with rolls of maps and pages of notes. Mahrree watched in astonishment, and thought she even heard what could be identified as a giggle escape as he placed the stack of papers on the table. He unrolled a large piece of paper that looked like a map and used the mugs from midday meal to hold down the corners. Mahrree's breath caught when she realized what she was seeing. "You want to find the ruins? Terrap's land?" She ran her hand over the new large map Perrin had made, complete with arrows, lines, potential paths, camp locations, and question marks. "Yes, and beyond." He struggled to keep his voice low in his excitement. "And there is a beyond. I'm positive there's no danger, no poison, no undetectable gases that kill entire populations overnight. There never was. Only land, and vast amounts of it, just waiting to be explored and settled. I'm sure it's where we began, where the Creator placed the first 500 families. I want to find the proof. Now, Mahrree, you know I've had old maps, but I must confess I never showed you these." She watched breathlessly as he shifted some of the papers and put others on top. The parchment of the 3 maps he laid out before her seemed far older and thicker, with dark patches and stains. "Some of these suggest what's beyond our borders. King Quirrell the First Scouts made this one, my oldest in the collection. Vast regions of land to the west, right there beyond the desert." Mahrree stared in wonder, not daring to touch the parchment that was dated more than 130 years ago. "Perrin," she whispered in awe, "how did you get—" "I took them from the old garrison when the new one was being constructed. They were nearly buried by dirt in the old storage room my father used. They were probably destined for that fire Quirrell started, but were forgotten about. If I had more time, I would have dug some more." Mahrree alternated between holding her breath and panting as he spoke. "There seemed to be a crate buried there, too," he continued. "But I felt rather guilty for finding and taking these, so I left before anyone saw me. I never had another chance to go back or investigate the crate. It's probably still there, in fact. I moved an old cabinet in front of it to hide it, but now it's buried, along with my father's paperwork. I doubt anyone ever looked for these maps. I shouldn't have taken them, but I was 22, and I rationalized that no one wanted them. I told you that I rescued them from a rubbish heap, but, well, I did rescue them. Anyway, Mahrree." She heard his voice, but was too stunned by all that he laid before her. He wanted to go. He wanted to find the ruins. He was saying her name. She forced herself to stop staring at the fantastic display and look up at him. He grinned with the enthusiasm of an 11-year-old. His dark eyes were so vibrant they lit up his entire face. "Mahrree," he said with a passion she had never heard before. "You'll love this one. I've been saving it for a very long time. Well, now it's time." He took one of the maps he hadn't yet unfurled and gently slid out a smaller map concealed inside it. The parchment was brown on the edges and slightly crumbly. "What is this?" she whispered as he carefully unrolled it. "And why have you never shown it to me before?" She could already tell it was something ancient and important and beautiful. "This, my darling wife, is Terrap's map," she gasped. "His original one." She stopped breathing. She stopped moving. Her heart may have stopped beating, but then it began again with such pounding force she felt it in her throat. Right there, in front of her, with markings and writings and notes and everything, Terrap's own map. Without meaning to, her hand hovered over it. "Just don't fondle it," he whispered in her ear. "I don't think the old parchment likes to be handled as a statue. So, Mahrree, tell me, what do you think?" She was thinking too many things at once. She wanted to scream, to shout Terrap's name, to leap up and down and kiss her husband and kiss him again, but she couldn't. She couldn't even blink. She didn't want to miss any of it. There, in ink still dark enough that Terrap could have applied it yesterday, was a detailed map of the land directly west of Sands. She felt her knees grow weak as she began to realize what was before her. What had been done? "Perrin," she breathed. "It was you! You did it! You—" She heard a chair pull up behind her. "You better sit down. You've gone gray." She sat down, only to be closer to the map. Gingerly, she tenderly fingered a corner of it. Perrin sat next to her. "Happy 19th anniversary. A bit early." Mahrree let out a very reverent but very excited whimper. You made the copy!" He grinned and nodded, nearly exploding with enthusiasm. "Several, actually." He gestured to the rolls which had hidden Terrap's map. "When I made the map of Moorland, I realized I could make other maps, too. I'm sorry I couldn't let you see the first copy of Terrap's map I sent to the administrators, which they then sent back here for me to authenticate. Although I disguised my writing, I was sure you would have recognized some of the characters I made. I couldn't let you know yet. I made the extras," he indicated the roll of additional maps, "to send out to others, should the administrators declare the land still poisoned. I fully intended to smuggle them out in the army messenger bags, as I did with the first one I sent. But now I don't have that access anymore. So here they sit, waiting for me to come up with another solution." Mahrree could barely breathe until she burst out with, "Why did you never tell me you had this before? It's been in our house all this time. Perrin, Terrap was in my house." He put a finger on her lips and laughed lightly. "Shh, I wanted to tell you," he whispered. "But do you remember our second wedding anniversary?" How could either of them forget the night she told him she wanted 2 more children, and he turned into the rabid dog of the administrators? "Oh, yes, most definitely." "Do you remember how I stayed up that night, working on numbers and maps?" "Yes, I came down and—" "Wait a minute. You knew I knew?" He smiled. "I know everything, Mahrree. This was even on our table at the time. I'm sure you touched it, but didn't even realize it because it was too dark. The previous evening on the blanket in our front garden, I understood something about you that Hogel had warned me about. I even wrote it down, and later burned it so you and no one else would ever see it." Mahrree blinked at him. "What did Hogel say? What did you write?" "That you are the most dangerous woman in the world. Think back to your state of mind then. What if you knew I had these maps?" Mahrree threw her hands in the air. "I would have insisted we go." Oh, I see." She bit her lip. Could have been a problem, huh? Too many ideas ran through her head of what she would have done had she known Terrap's map was in her home for all those years. Until she remembered, you and Hogel really thought I was the most dangerous woman in the world? Absolutely. In fact, you recently solidified your claim to the title. The truth is dangerous, especially shouted in front of thousands of people. She looked back at the map. "Oh, Perrin, it's amazing, but I really think I could have kept quiet about it." His laughter startled her. "You keep quiet?" She bit her lip. "I guess the evidence to the contrary is rather overwhelming, isn't it?" "It doesn't matter anymore." He grinned and kissed her. "Take a look and tell me where you want to go first." She laughed a sigh. There, in amazing detail on the small parchment, was all anyone could ever hope for. A narrow passage of land between the desert and the mountain range opened to a vast valley area. The distance to the valley was barely 2 miles through the desert, easily traversed. To the north was the same mountain range that sat beyond them in edge, and to the south was a large open plain where remnants of a massive city, larger than Idumea, once existed. Beyond it, to the west, south, and east, where the desert ended, were vast fields, grasses, trees, rivers, everything a civilization could need. Mahrree's eyes were drawn to the north again. The mountain range ended 2/3 of the way, leaving a large opening in the northwest. Terrap had merely put a question mark there. The land Terrap outlined was enormous, several times larger than their world. "It seems Terrap didn't explore most of this land to the south." Perrin gestured to the map. "But according to this scale, it's hundreds of miles, so no surprise there. The dotted line around the perimeter of the ruins is where he personally explored. The dashes further out are as far as the scouts went. The rest of the map comes from the records made at the carvings. The Southern Sea doesn't even show up for another 300 miles. There's no border to the west, no end in sight. And right here," Perrin said, pointing to the mountains in the northeast where the question mark stood. "When I made the copy, I put mountains all along the top." "Why?" Mahrree asked, still astonished. Her husband was the unknown copier she'd wanted so desperately to meet. And Terrap's map was in her home all these years? Right under her nose was the truth and evidence she had craved for all her life. She just never knew where to look. "Because I wanted the expedition to discover it," Perrin explained. "I knew they'd be terrified to go out, knowing the mountains actually ended somewhere. I hoped they'd be intrigued by the gap they'd find and follow it. Instead, they all turned and ran for home instead. Can you imagine? Half of them were soldiers, and they were cowards." He shook his head in disgust. "So this is your plan?" Mahrree whispered. "Yes. Mahrree, let me take you away from Edge, from all the world. Let's go prove that Terrap's land is safe. Then let's go beyond it, to the northwest. What happens where the mountains end? What a fantastic adventure for Pato. We can do this." The ruins. Tear up her childhood hero. His map underneath her fingers. His lands begging to be rediscovered. She could do this for him. Prove what he wasn't allowed to do. They could do this together. No, they couldn't. Mahrree let out a small moan. Perrin's face was so hopeful that she dreaded what she had to say next. Oh, Perrin, we have a grandbaby coming in just a moon's time. That's what we can do. Be grandparents. We can't go now. I know, he gripped her arm. And that's what I want too. But Mahrree, we can do both. We don't go until the baby's born and Jatesy's rested up, maybe early weeding season. I'll need that long to gather supplies and plan properly. Since the soldiers no longer care about us, it will be easier. We can use Deck's barn to hold everything. There's room in the rafters to hide it all. I've already measured. We'll secure a few horses, and I'm sure Shem will find a way to bring us Clark. Then we'll vanish, like Jordan's grandparents. Maybe that's what they did. We can take a pack horse laden with paper and ink just for you to record everything. Pato and I can scout the area while you sit at the ruins playing Terrap and copying everything he did. You'll have to learn to ride a horse, but we can do that in the next few weeks. Mahrree, he said, his face glowing with anticipation. As much as I hate to leave Jatesy and Deckett, we can't sit here and mope. We'll be back before the baby's a year old. We can't let Pato continue like this, Mahrree. Think of the adventure. Think of everything we can bring back. We can change the world. He was shaking her arms with so much zeal, she wasn't surprised later to see small bruises there. He released her arms and rubbed them apologetically. More calmly, he said, "Just think about it, all right?" She gazed again at the map and tenderly ran a finger across some of Terrap's words, written in tiny letters to conserve space. The words potential farmlands refused to be wiped off. Oh, Perrin, I'm thinking about it. In fact, I've been thinking about it my whole life. It took them hours to settle down that night. Mahrree kept Perrin's larger planning map on the desk in their bedroom, frequently jumping out of bed to check it and ask him questions. He never opened his eyes but grinned as he mumbled, "Uh-huh, sure, we could try that too. Add it to the list." Mahrree went so far as to plan out what clothing she'd take and how she'd cook on the journey before the fatigue of the day overwhelmed her. After she finally fell asleep in the early hours of the morning, she dreamed again of a large house filled with noisy children. Terrap was sitting in the corner, reading a story to some of them. Two men sat in the dark office of an unlit building. "I must confess," said Mal to his companion, "this new scenario is turning out to be more rewarding than I initially anticipated. You've redeemed yourself." Genevieve nodded once, greatly relieved. "You'll not be disappointed, sir. I promise you that." "I don't think I will be. I believe you can pull this off. To get the measures passed through the administrators was quite a feat in itself. Now, time is of the essence. I expect nothing else but to be completely impressed with your next efforts." "You will be, sir," Genevieve said. "I'm personally going to see to everything." "You do that. And if your efforts do not impress me, do as your predecessor. Don't bother coming back." And that's the end of that chapter. Thank you.